If you want to purchase an SHTF rifle but you have no idea what to do, this video is for you. So with these uncertain times, you've probably been binge watching channels like T-Rex Arms, Garand Thumb, Demolition Ranch, Hickok 45, Military Arms Channel, and one of them lets it slip that their gun costs $9,000 and you're starting to wonder, can I even afford to have one of these? Now, let's be honest, if you're a first-time gun buyer, there is absolutely no need for you to buy a $9,000 gun. And you may be saying, well, I want the best. Well, I can certainly understand that, but you got to understand there is a point of diminishing return. And you're probably saying, well, what do you mean by that? Let's say you went out and bought a Ferrari. More than likely, you are not going to be able to drive that Ferrari to the limits in which it was intended to be driven at. The exact same thing holds true of a gun that cost $9,000. Honestly, there's not a lot of people that can honestly drive a $9,000 gun to its limits. So for now, let's be realistic and let's just push that off to the side. Let's get rid of those dreams and aspirations and let's get real. Real talk. The question that you should be asking yourself is this weapon that I'm going to buy or build, is it going to be adequate for the task which I intended? And that's just it. Most people don't have a plan before they get started, and so they just buy something and then they start buying all kind of stuff, and then in the end they realize that they wasted a lot of money along the way, money that could have been used for more ammo and for more training. And so now the question becomes, well, how do I get started? Well, the very first thing that you're going to have to understand in this process is you have limitations. For example, if you have limited time with any weapons platforms, period, you're probably going to have to learn how to shoot first. And so what that means is it gets rid of all of the specialty stuff like a DMR with a longer barrel and an SBR with a shorter barrel. And now that you've eliminated the need to have any kind of specialty rifle, you understand you need a general purpose rifle, and you could go for something like this at 16 inches. Another thing that you need to be mindful of is how far do you actually see yourself shooting the rifle? Now, for example, do you realistically think that you could make a shot at 300 yards? Now try to picture yourself looking down 3 football fields. Are you going to be spending the majority of your time shooting past 300 yards or underneath 300 yards? And the reason that I say that is because that will determine the type of optic that you put on the gun. If you see yourself shooting under 3 football field lengths, then a red dot is probably the answer for you. If you see yourself shooting over 300 yards most of the time, then maybe an LPVO is the answer. A lot of people just go right in the middle and they go ahead and they get an ACOG. The problem that people have with LPVOs and ACOGs is typically the eye relief, how close their eye actually has to get to the reticle. And so maybe if you're just starting out, a red dot is the answer for you because there is no eye relief. You can still see the sight picture from a red dot no matter where your eye is. On this AKM, you can see that the red dot is mounted forward because I have to, because there is no rail right here. But here on the AR, I've got it mounted further back. The beauty of having a red dot is you don't have to worry about where you place it on the rail. And if magnification is an issue, they also have magnifiers which you can add to the back of the rail so that you can magnify using a red dot. But even with having a red dot and a magnifier, you still have to train. And the cool thing about having a red dot is, number one, they don't cost as much as an ACOG or an LPVO. And number two, they're lighter. And you still have capability out to 300 yards, even without a magnifier. Now, the next thing that you might want to think about is the ability to identify your target. One thing that new shooters need to realize is they may not be shooting during the daytime. They might actually have to shoot at night. And being able to identify your target at night is really important. Now, the next thing that you might want to think about is, are you right-handed or are you left-handed? Do you have the ability to work the safety if you're left-handed? Being able to operate the weapon from both sides of the weapon can be critical. So you may have to spend a little bit of extra money to make sure that you can operate the weapon properly from the left side. Make no mistake, it's important. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't learn how to overcome being left-handed using a right-handed gun, because with training, you can learn that. But it's going to make you more efficient if you actually set it up with ambidextrous controls. And something else to consider is, are the controls enlarged? Are you going to have the ability to work this weapon if you're wearing gloves? Now, the next consideration is, does the weapon actually fit you? i.e. the stock, the grip, and the rail. Should you go with a fixed stock, or do you want an adjustable stock? Notice what happens when I slide this all the way forward and I try to go and shoot. everything is really cramped right here, and it really affects the dexterity in your trigger pull. Now here's a quick tip for those of you that don't know how to determine your length of pull. So what you want to do is you want to take the buttstock and you want to place it in between your bicep and your forearm, and you want your hand and your trigger finger to be nice and relaxed and comfortable. That way when you go to fire the weapon, you're not going to be all jammed up. And that's actually going to give you better results right off the line. So maybe because this is your first rifle, you go with one that is actually adjustable. The next consideration is probably going to be your sling. Are you going to run a dual point or are you going to run a single point? Now, being that this is your first rifle, I would highly recommend that you go with a double point. It allows you to do just about everything that you need to do, and you can even purchase a sling that will go from a double point to a single point sling, much like the Magpul that I've got on this one. Another thing that you might think about is, can you operate the sling fast so that you can work it and punch out fast? One thing that I like is being able to have the weapon up close to my body so that if I need to work on something in front of me, it's not just loose and flopping all over the place. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is your muzzle devices. Should you go with a brake or a flash hider? A brake actually helps you to control the weapon a little bit more, and so that's better for follow-up shots. A flash hider actually hides the flash, and so you're not telegraphing to your threat target. Muzzle brakes are typically for weapons that are a little bit more unruly and hard to handle. Besides, if you put a muzzle brake on your gun and you go to the range, I promise you, everybody is going to hate you. Muzzle brakes are loud. It's probably best to go with a flash hider before getting a muzzle brake. Okay, let's take a break from the video real quick because I know that inevitably it's going to come up. People are going to ask me about things like cans or suppressors on the end of their rifle, and they're probably going to talk about PECs or lasers. Well, number one, the more things that you add to the rifle itself, the heavier it's going to become. It's also going to cost you exponentially a lot more money. And things like lasers, they can actually be really dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. I'm all for suppressors, but that's going to blow the budget out of the water, and there's also the legal aspect of that as well. I'm all for those things and anything having to do with the Second Amendment that helps support it. However, you might want to think about, for your first budget rifle, just leaving those accessories off of it until you get a little bit more training. And besides, you can save that money and you can apply it to things that you're probably not thinking about, like what about a bag for the rifle? Understand you're going to have to buy cleaning supplies and stuff to maintain the weapon with too. What about more ammo and more mags? Which brings up the question of how many mags should I run, and should I get the ones that have these windows? As a beginning shooter, you're probably not going to be good at actually counting your shots, so maybe the window is a good idea. But I would highly suggest that no matter what you do, mags are cheap, even the expensive ones, so go ahead and buy the best that you can for the platform that you get. And as far as how many, I always tell people have a minimum of 4. 4 is plenty to get you started. You're probably not going to have a vest or a tactical belt, a war belt, or any of that kind of stuff, and so the reality is that maybe you just, you have one in the weapon and then you stuff one into your back pocket, and that's what you have to run for a little while. And don't think that you have to go out and you have to buy all that stuff right off the bat. Finish your weapon first. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff to think about right out of the gate. And so now maybe it's time for you to put pen to paper. When I came up with the concept of this rifle right here, this was my actual original plan. I also knew that I wasn't going to be able to buy all of the products all at once. And so I planned it out in stages. There were actually 4 stages to this rifle build. Currently, I am in stage 3. Now understand, this is not my primary weapon. Maybe it is my primary weapon. I lost my primary weapon in a tragic boating accident. What I wanted was a rifle that I could hand to anybody and I could give them a real quick lesson and they could use the gun. That meant that the rifle had to be light, that it had to have ambidextrous controls, and because I don't know who's actually shooting the weapon, that's what made me decide what kind of optic I was going to put on it. And if I handed this to a pro, they would know how to adjust accordingly anyway. Now, most of us do not have a ton of money to just put a Daniel Defense gun on the shelf. And I totally get that, because for the price of one Daniel Defense gun or a BCM or a US Arms, I could pretty much buy 2 weapons, if not 3. My initial target for the gun was that I did not want to spend over $2,000 on the gun build itself. And then for another $1,000, I could add a can to the end of it if I wanted to. Now, the most important thing on the gun for me is I had to ask myself, is every component on this weapon adequate for the job? And that literally helped determine what I was going to buy and what I was willing to put on the weapon. Because to me, there's really no point in building a rifle if it isn't going to do the job that you set it out to do in the first place. So in the beginning, I went ahead and I started researching, and along the way, I was actually able to find some of the components, like this rail, for example, on sale because it was blemished. The sling was one that I purchased used. The primary arms red dot, I bought it blemished. I did pay full price for a lot of the components on the rifle, but I didn't just go out and start spending money. I actually started looking around for the best deals that I could find. And sometimes that requires a little bit of patience. Now, as far as staying in the confines of my budget, I have definitely done that. I'm currently at 1,500 bucks. But like I said, it's not exactly done. There's a couple things that I want to add to it. If y'all would like to see a more specific video on the specific components that I put into this rifle build, then let me know in the comment section, because I wouldn't mind doing a video on it. This video was meant to be a primer just to get you started and to get you thinking. I would never tell you do exactly as I do. You need to check out as many channels as you possibly can. Get as many opinions from different channels and different people that you trust as you can. A lot of people would say there's really no wrong, but that's not really true. There's a lot of crap weapons out there that I would not want to use. There's definitely a right way to do it, and you can do it within the confines of a budget as well. So hey, if you're Honey Smack digging the video, then like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Leave me a comment if you want to see a video on the specific parts in this build. And until next time, y'all, keep fueling those fires.